good to meet you, though. Should I just call you Anselmian, or do you want me to call you by like a human name? What's your
Yeah, sure.
preference there?
Human name. Anselmian's a weird name. Just call me Matt. That's my name.
Matt. Okay. I'm
Yep.
gonna put a little note on your account because I'm actually a horrible name rememberer. Note
That is fine.
Matt.
I probably yeah. I'm the same. I never take offense when people forget my name because it just gives me permission to forget their name.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what. Okay. Also, first of all, I've set up my
Yeah.
sound again. It's still not perfect, but it's like
Mm,
loud and clear and no buzz and stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. It's fine by me. Yeah.
Nice.
My expectations. Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Okay. It should.
Yeah.
It was fucked before, so this is good. And I'm
Oh,
not
great.
entirely sure what the topic is. All I know is EM
Sure.
sort of put us in a room
Yeah.
together. We have different views about meta-ethics. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
like,
That's
are you
right.
wanting to debate a specific proposition, or are you just kind of wanting to ask some questions?
Well, I was thinking, well, so I've just background, I've watched some of your debates with, I think Joe Schmidt and I forget what the other guy's name was, some other vegan fellow,
Hmm.
and about your sort of issues with, objective morality and even understanding what it would be for such a thing to obtain, right? And my guess is that Ethan, I don't know, Ethan, feel free to step in at any time. EM, he wants to, he thinks my view is interesting but difficult to understand, so he thought he could get a better understanding of why I am so insistent on objective morality by sort of pitting me against someone who doesn't think there is such a thing. And I think that's roughly the shape of the debate. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, so you can call me Ethan Isaac, by the way. That's my name.
Yep.
EM are my
Sure.
initials. Um, but
Gonna do the note here again.
sorry, can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, no, I said I'm just gonna do the note here again.
Okay, no
Ethan.
worries. But yeah, so Matthew and I know each other personally. We go to the same university, and we've done some we've talked to each other about moral realism, and I find Matthew has some very interesting views. For instance, like two views that you've put forward are that like factory farming is completely fine, and that like non-procreative sex is always wrong. And those are sort of interesting views in and of themselves, but what really makes them interesting to me is that you take this to be a sort of like universal objective view as opposed to like just sort of your own subjective evaluation. And then I feel like whenever we talk about it, you start explaining, and then it's just like static, and then I have no idea how we get to the conclusion. So then, of course, like Isaac, you're pretty experienced with these debates. So I just thought, maybe I can put you two guys together. Hopefully, you'll both enjoy it, and I can certainly get something out of it.
Yeah, no, so I think
Yeah.
his description was right then, but that was also pretty much my description, and that still just leaves the initial question, which is what exactly are we
Yeah.
trying to do? Are we trying to like
Yeah.
resolve
Sure.
some
So
proposition?
yeah.
Are we?
Yeah, so let's start with the proposition that there are moral realism is true. How about that? They're very
Ooh.
simple. And I don't know. Do you have a problem with that, or would you like to start
Yeah,
elsewhere?
I'm not sure I grant that that is a proposition. Are you just
Oh,
doing the
okay.
standard
Oh no,
def?
just no. As a matter to be debated, like you can debate it by saying, "Well, I don't think that's a meaningful statement," etc. That's okay.
Yeah,
Is that
I mean, I have
yeah?
slightly different semantics. I almost like wouldn't think
Okay.
of it
Oh,
like a debate if there's not,
sure.
but it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. So, and
Yeah.
just to be clear, when you say moral realism, are you using this sort of standard
Mm,
definition we get in modern analytic philosophy, where it's the conjunction of the following three theses: that moral statements are truth apt, at least one is
hmm.
true, so no error theory,
Yeah.
and the truth maker is stance independent.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I've listened to your previous debates. I think that I can sort of get my view to align with those criteria. I'm perfectly happy with
Well,
that.
it might be worth taking a minute because we're not really doing a strict debate here. So hopefully a bit of
Sure.
meta conversation is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
From my point of view, I'm never interested in boxing someone in semantically. That is to say,
Yeah.
to foist my
Mm.
definitions on them such that they can't express the thing they want to. That's not
Mm.
really getting anywhere. That's just
Yeah.
making them not able to say the words they want to say to express. So if that
Yeah.
construal is actually the kind of way you think about your view and want to argue for it, then sure. But if to you moral
Mm.
realism means something else, I'm happy to hear you out and see what I think about
Yeah.
the proposition on that term meaning.
Yeah, sure. Um, like I have no problem with sort of like, you know, it's an interest. So in my view, the whole point of these kinds of discussions is to like express yourself in a way that someone else can understand, right? So
Hmm.
you know, if I think that my view has no purchase at all on your concepts, then I'll make that clear. I'll say, well, you know, we're debating something completely different. Here's what I think. But I think that my view is close enough to that sort of you already come preloaded with like, you know, at least enough background that we can have a good discussion about that, and my view won't lose too much by being translated into those terms.
Yeah,
Uh,
if that
is
works
that
for you, that's fine. I
yeah,
just want to make
yeah,
sure that
yeah.
you weren't feeling boxed in if there's a
No,
way
no,
you'd
no,
rather
no, no.
express it. But yeah, okay.
Absolutely not. If I am, or if something I commit to like differs slightly from a standard understanding, I'm happy to make clear, you know, what my stance is. That's fine.
Sure. Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate that. Well, I'll say something
okay,
before we continue then. So, I'm
great.
not sure it's a proposition, but the
Mm,
part that I don't understand, so there's actually
mm,
two sort of major things. So, first of all, when we say moral statements, I have a question about what exactly we're quantifying over. Like, are we quantifying over
mm,
any? I mean, if you saw the Joe debate, you know the point I'm making. Then the other one that
yeah.
I want to ask is about the third thesis. I have a hard time understanding what it would mean for moral statements to be stance independently true, unless we're just talking about some kind, what I take to be a kind of trivial naturalist form of moral realism, where moral statements just reduce to statements like doing this action will maximize well-being. Now, I don't think anything's like wrong about a view like that. I just don't think that that's making any it's not making the sort of claim that I have trouble with
Mm,
anymore. You've like kind of
yeah.
paid this ontological price to make sense with a view like that, basically. So yeah, those are my two things. I want to understand what
Mm,
exactly we're quantifying over with moral terms, and I want to understand the stance independence bit and see if it just reduces to some like trivial naturalist sort of thing, or if it's something spooky. I have a hard time understanding. So you can address one or both or whatever you'd rather start with.
sure. Thanks. Yeah, that's very helpful. So let me think. So here's my provisional answer to the first question. So what are we quantifying over? I think that so whatever moral facts, I guess. So whatever moral principles are the principles governing the correct exercise of the will that are most prior, or at least belong to the category of norms that are most prior in respect to governing the will. So, for example, you know, a more restricted norm might be, well, as a lawyer, you know, I have such an obligation to defend this murderer, but as a human being, you know, I feel that my obligations as a human being supersede those as a lawyer because they're most prior in my constitution. Therefore, you know, I will not defend the law. I will not defend the murderer, even though my obligations as a lawyer sort of oblige me to. Right. So, morality just is that class of norms governing the will that is sort of a highest categorical priority. So the only thing that trumps a moral norm is another moral norm or a more fundamental moral norm. That
So
sort of thing.
I do
Or
want to be
agents.
precise. Sorry to cut
Yeah.
in, but it sounded like you were defining morality. Specifically what I want to know is what a moral statement is. If it's kind of trivial
Oh,
to
okay.
explain how you get there from how you're defining morality, that's true. But just because the
Yeah.
realism as we defined it talks about moral statements, not
Sure.
morality.
Yeah, sure. And sort of moral statements are statements about these norms, right? So if a moral statement is true, then there is such a norm corresponding to that statement, uh, you know, governing my actions. If not, then there is no such thing.
Okay,
Um,
just let
yeah.
me make sure I understand. So a moral statement is going to be
Mm.
any statement that makes reference to the kind of norm you just described, right?
Yes, it's a statement claiming that there is such a norm, right? Uh, So, or there isn't, so I think there's other things that you could say about it, like sort of, higher order statements about them and so forth. But like the primary sense of moral statement is like just a first order statement about whether there is or isn't such a norm.
Sure. Okay. Well, minimally, those are gonna count. Maybe
Yeah.
there's other
Yeah.
things we want to count as moral,
Yeah.
but whatever. We
Yeah.
don't have to quibble
Yeah.
over the vague edge there.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So I understand that in answer to my first question, I understand that by a moral proposition, you mean a proposition that makes reference to these kind of norms you're describing. But I must admit, I'm having a hard time understanding what exactly you're describing there. I don't know if you want to elaborate more or give an example.
Great. Yeah. So basically my approach is sort of like, well, let me take a leaf out of Plato's book. So in the Republic, he's having this dispute with Thrasymachus about whether justice is merely the interest of the strong, right? And Plato argues that like a person's interest is relative to the kind of agent that there are. So whatever kind of agent that you are, whatever is distinctive of the kind of agent that you are, like prescribes the interest insofar as you are that agent. So, for example, what makes a ruler is that they, govern for the good of the community. And so the good of the community is per se in the interest of a ruler, even if individual rulers want to violate their interest as a ruler by, sort of acting contrary to the good of the community, right? So in this sense, Plato would say, there are sort of norms which you can adopt by taking on certain roles. Like, when insofar as I am an actor, being a good actor, is in my interest. But that doesn't mean that being a good actor is in my interest as, say, a human being, right? Because before I am an actor, I'm a human being. In fact, even to be an actor presupposes that I am a human being. So anything which is, say, good for being an actor, but bad for being a human being is not actually in my interest, properly speaking, because what I am primarily is not an actor, but a human being. So for me, the moral norms are precisely those norms which correspond to that most prior category of norms that are, at least in my view, closely related to my constitution. Now, of course, this is a sort of niche, well, not niche, but I think it's a classical view, but it's not a universal position amongst moral realists. Of course, this is my particular variety of moral realism. So I think if I was like in a room full of other moral realists, I'd just say the most prior category of norms, right? But this is how I would cash out what it is to be the most prior category. Does that help?
Well, why don't I try to repeat it back to you and you
Sure.
tell me if it has helped or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying that minimally functional human agents or something like that. We could quibble over the category, but there's this category of agents, basically. They have constitutions, and what is moral for them refers to the thing that sort of maximally brings about a world in accord with their constitution, like something kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it brings about the ends of their dispositions, is what I would say. But yeah, yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay, but now I don't know if we disagree. That does sound like, so I don't know. Have you heard the three-part separation that Lance makes between realist views of trivial, false, and incoherent?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think I understand. I think I understand what those categories are. I'm not sure what it would be. Okay, so so I think
Let's
like
not go way down that
I'm in
pathway.
danger of
Let, let,
falling into triviality here. In your view,
yes.
perhaps is
Yeah.
that the problem?
That's right. Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say we shouldn't go way
Yeah,
down that pathway because it's an
yeah,
aside, but just if it's
yeah,
beneficial to see
yeah,
how I'm
yeah,
viewing it. Yeah. So
yeah.
it looks a little like we're going in that direction because to say like agents have a certain constitution, I mean, it just
Mm,
sounds like you're saying people are certain ways, and
mm,
obviously part of being a way as a person is like your desire set or something like that,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
That's part of the way
yeah,
you are, or your constitution.
yeah,
And then what's
yeah.
moral for you is just what realizes your constitution. It sounds like you're just saying what
Mm,
is ethical for any agent is what maximally realizes their desires. And on a view like that, I don't disagree. That is
yeah,
fine with me. But I don't.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
is that what you're saying, or do you think something
yeah.
more
So, well,
substantial? Yeah.
I am saying something at least somewhat more substantial than that. And I think this is getting into my answer to your second question, actually, what stance independence is.
Mhm.
So I
Let's
don't
not shift
think
to
that.
that. Let's try to, unless it's necessary. Let's try to stay
It's
on the
well,
one.
I'm trying to stay on the one topic, but I'm just sort of indicating that it's relevant also to answering your other question. All right.
Sure.
So I think maybe where I escape triviality here is where I would say like your desires aren't the sum of your interests, right? So I
Let
have
me think about that. Sorry, one
disposition.
second. One
Yeah.
second. Just let me think about that. That was a weird sentence. Your desires are not the sum of your interests. Okay, sorry, just to be clear, on my semantics, I think
Yeah.
desires and interests are probably the same thing. So yeah,
Right.
I would
Yes.
need different
Yeah.
concepts applied there for sure.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Great. So yeah, not trivial. Great.
Well, I didn't grant
So
that.
yeah.
It might still be
Yeah,
trivial, but
yeah, maybe, but at least there's something there's something we disagree about. That's good.
well, it's not clear
Okay,
there's something we disagree about. If it turns out being trivial, we agree.
okay, yeah, okay, great. So right, so I think that desires that we have are just a special case of dispositions, right? So things can have dispositions without having desires. So for example, plants they have a disposition to grow, engage in a degree of homeostasis, photosynthesize, etc. Uh, but they don't have desires as we would,
Okay, don't mind
anything
me
approaching
butting
what
in a
we would
little.
call.
I like to
Yeah,
ask questions as I go, so make sure I'm following. To be
sure.
clear, to you, a
Yeah,
disposition is just a behavior
yeah.
that some given thing may or may not be conscious tends towards.
Well, tends yes. That's a way to put it. Although I would just clarify that I don't mean tends towards necessarily in a merely statistical sense, right? So if you might have a whole bunch of plants, every member of a species maybe is afflicted with some kind of disease from birth or something, and that might make it sort of generally true that they tend to die. Only
Oh
the rare
no, you're
ones
gonna
tend to
start talking
survive.
about teleology, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I see.
That's the yeah. So I think teleology is related to having dispositional qualities, right? So teleology is just it's a precondition of having dispositions in general. So you can have dispositions which are kind of accidental or essential, right? So constitutive or not constitutive, maybe it might be a better word. So these are the dispositions that make me what I am, that make me a living thing, for instance. And there are sort of accidental dispositions like being combustible, which although they may be a consequence of what I am, they're not part of what it is to be what I am, right?
Okay,
So yeah.
I'm going to flag right now that I think we will 100% be stuck on figuring out what the fuck language means for this whole conversation because we have radically
Uh,
different schema here.
yeah, sure. I think this might have been anticipated by Ethan, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, here, let
yeah,
me say
yeah,
something. So
sure.
I understand if it were, which you've said it's not, just a statistical notion, that would be clear to me. There's behaviors that things tend towards, leafs tend towards things, and you could say that desires fall within that category also as behaviors that things tend towards. You could say they're a disposition if that's how you define disposition. Once you
Mm.
bring in teleology, I actually am again back to like not sure if we're talking about something propositional. Like to say that to say that if every plant were of a species were like wilted or like had a disease or something like this, there's some other way that the plant should be, and that should
Mm.
is not dependent on a stance. That would not I would not understand what you mean if you said that. It sounds like that's what you're saying.
Well, okay, so maybe rather than 100%, maybe like 99% of plants, for instance, they were afflicted with the disease, and
Sure.
one thing wasn't, right? So, even if you're afflicted with a disease, like you're still doing. Oh, well, actually, I don't know if that helps. Yeah, anyway, yeah, so the one plant that sort of isn't afflicted with the disease is doing what all the others do sort of better, even though it's not like the most statistically likely outcome of its typical conditions, right?
Wait, well, it's not doing what all the others do better. What about having a disease? Or what about yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
having a
so it's
disease
yeah,
as
so
well as they are.
it's doing what So the other plants, what makes a thing a plant is obviously not, for example, that it is, sort of combustible, and even that it is sort of subject to disease is sort of, how you say, it presupposes that the plant is, for example, something that tends towards the goods of life, right? Of like efficient nutrition and growth, etc.
You lost me
Um,
there. Sorry, you lost me there. You said
yeah,
what if a plant can have a
mm,
disease, that means that a plant
yeah,
has like a teleology
yeah,
oriented away from disease?
yeah. Because to be a, maybe here we're running into another difference, because I think, even to be what it is to be a disease, right? A disease is precisely to be a disruption of some kind of sort of constitutive, some kind of living thing's proper processes, right? And when I
Yeah,
want to give an account of what it is to be a living thing, I designate certain processes as like core to that notion. Other things which might be accidental or consequential, but not core to that notion.
yeah, if you define disease normatively like that. Okay, wait. Sorry, I'm losing track of where we're trying to
Yeah,
go here.
yeah,
We're arguing
yeah.
about whether
Sorry.
moral.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
whether
this
disposition, whether dispositions are like merely predictions of statistically likely outcomes.
well, I'm not disagreeing or anything. I'm trying
Mm.
to just understand your term meaning so I can
Yeah,
understand the initial
yeah.
propositions. We're trying to resolve this question about what we're referring to when we say moral statements. So there are these statements that refer
Mm.
to something's teleology, basically. That sounds like that's what you're
Yeah,
saying. That's fair.
yeah, yeah. Sure.
Okay, and when you let me just continue with this line of questioning here. So
Mm.
when you say that something has a
Wait, sorry.
teleology,
Before we proceed,
sure.
not so. I think that moral statements are whatever fulfills a thing's teleology in respect of its will, because obviously things can have teleology without without having moral interests, right? So moral
You lost
interests.
me there. So
So,
something has a
so
teleology, something has a will, and then what
yeah,
is
yeah,
it
yeah.
to be
So yeah,
moral
okay,
to that?
so okay, yeah, sorry. So okay, let's start with teleology, right? So I think that like living things in general, are characterized by certain teleologies, towards nutrition, homeostasis, growth, reproduction, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Um, Now, amongst but different living things obviously are constituted by different kinds of teleologies. Like, for example, a
Right.
bird has a developmental teleology towards flight that I, as a human being, don't have. Right?
Hmm.
Will, our ability to will things, to want things, and intentionally and rationally pursue them, that is the faculty. That is that is the particular teleology that morality is concerned with. Whereas
Wait, you
humans
lost.
obviously have other.
Sorry, you lost me there.
Sorry,
To be clear,
yeah, yeah.
will is a teleology.
So will is a faculty that is a result of a teleology in us toward certain characteristic ends, right? Understanding the world and acting in accordance with that understanding.
Oh,
Where,
that.
whereas we where, whereas we have other kinds of ends which are not that, right? So like digestion, that's nothing to do with the will. That's just how our body works. It's also a product of teleology, but teleology in a sort of different direction, in a digestive direction, if you like. So morality concerns only how I ought to will, right? So only the disposition of the will, uh, in the context of human nature. Does that
Okay,
does that help?
there's a few things I'm struggling with there, but it's kind of one
Yeah,
of those things where it's like we're putting together a few bricks I don't understand into a thing I
yeah,
don't quite
sure,
understand. So I'm not
great.
going to worry about the bigger. So I right now we're getting zooming in more and more. We start from
Mm,
this moral realism thing, the three
mm,
theses. We zero in on what moral terms are quantifying over. We'd say
yeah,
that they're these moral statements. They're the statements that refer to these teleological things or that make reference to something's teleology, and then you're giving, which I'm not fully following, further
mm,
distinctions about what. So for something to be moral, it's not just that it aligns with something's teleology. There's also some component of the will, and we can clarify how
yeah,
exactly all those relationships work. But there's still a building
mm.
block getting used there in the construction of the definition of morality that throws me off, which is just the notion of teleology. So before
Right,
even
great.
trying to understand exactly how
Yeah.
teleology, how you use it to construct your concept of morality or how it relates or whatever. Let's just clear that up. To say something has a teleology, does that
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand you on your terms. Does that mean that you're going to say things like that even if all or 99%, I don't think it matters, same thing for both, but even if all
Yeah.
the plants are have this disease, there is some kind of way that the plant ought be
Yes, I would say that.
independent of
Yeah.
anyone's point of view.
Yes, independent of anyone's point of view, just in virtue
And
of being a plant.
yeah, well, that was the follow up. Is when you say that, is all it means that when you define a plant as something that has such and such, like the part
Mm.
of your definition of plant is like tries to do so and so, tries to do these things. So to be a good
Yes.
plant is to fulfill those things that are in the definition of plant.
Right. Yes. And my point, and the reason why I think that's not sort of independent of a categorization is that, I think it's a natural kind, right? To use the philosophical terminology. So I don't think some such dispositions may be constructed according to human
Okay, wait,
interests,
sorry.
but
You're
other
gonna
times,
well, sorry,
other
I don't mean to cut
times
you off. Just
they
let
might
me one
harm.
sec.
Yeah.
Just you're getting
Yeah.
a bit ahead of me. Sorry. Sometimes I have to go
Yeah.
slow and methodical.
Yeah. Yeah. No worries.
I don't
Yeah.
mean to cut you off, but
Fair
there's
enough.
just no point if I'm stuck on something and it's kind of going in one ear.
Yeah,
Like
fair
I just
enough.
want
Fair
to
enough.
be
Yeah.
hearing what you're saying.
Yeah. Great. Great. Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, with so I understand what you mean by teleology. So it's weird because teleology sounds a little like I would put in like the spooky side, but when we disambiguate what you mean, all you're saying is you define things such that their goal set
Mm.
is part of their definition, and then
Mm.
to say it's meeting its teleological ends or whatever is just to say that it's fulfilling to the highest degree possible those parts of its
Mm.
definition. That
Great.
I'm completely fine with all of that. I don't think that I
Oh,
wouldn't I think
fantastic.
that's all true. So
Yeah.
I guess
Okay.
I guess if there's like a further kind of I don't want to say spooky, but if there's like a further part that I'm going to disagree with, maybe we could
Yeah.
like move to that. But this I think
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
fine. Wait, let's think of how it also, sorry, before you go, let's just think of how it relates back to the
Mm.
original thing. So we were asking what moral
Mm.
claims are. I do understand
Yeah.
what those are now. So I can generate moral
Yeah.
claims on your view. Like I'm looking at a screen, it's fulfilling its teleologically, at least its teleology, at least decently well because I can like read off of it and stuff. It's not like
Mm.
black and fizzy. It's part of the
Yeah.
definition of screen to be readable from. So
Yeah.
this thing's doing a decent job of meeting its like teleological
Yeah.
ends or whatever. So that makes sense to me. And then
Yeah.
now just re-examining realism with that in mind, I want to see if I
Mm.
disagree with the proposition. So
Great.
because that you're right, that does clarify what you mean by stance independent. It's just a fact. It's
Yeah.
analytic. It's part of the definition. So
Yeah.
well, there's a synthetic fact about how well it meets the definition, but it's like what its
Mm.
teleology is a matter of definition. It's analytic. So yeah,
Right.
sorry, and
Yeah.
just let me just continue for one sec here. So realism, moral statements are true, so statements like that can be true. So my monitor is doing, yeah, so that shit I said about the monitor is true. Those statements can definitely be true.
Yeah.
Stands
Yeah.
independently true, yeah, it's just a factor of a matter of definition. It's going to be true if I'm here or not, and at least one's true. Well, the monitor one's
Mm.
true. So I agree with realism on your view. I don't have any problem with the
Great.
realism you put forward
Okay.
here.
Okay. Fantastic. Are we done here? I don't know.
Possibly.
And maybe,
I would
yeah.
put it in the
Yeah.
trivial
So,
category though.
yeah. Well, I don't think it is trivial. I think it sort of, so when we make up these definitions, right? It might be that we are just making them up to suit ourselves, like jury rigging a category together, But or on the other hand, we might be mapping, cutting nature at the joints, as they say, right? Like, mapping onto real
Yeah.
distinctions, which sort of have an ontological meaning, whether or not there are observers to observe them. And so I think that the ends which are truly ours, because obviously we exist whether or not we observe ourselves, right? Like if someone's asleep without in a space pod in the middle of space, he still exists. So like there's such a thing as what it is to be us, which is not up to us, right? And in virtue of fulfilling that what it is to be us, we achieve our objective interests. Right, and we can be mistaken about these interests. So even if I happen to desire something, if that's not in accordance with with my sort of true underlying nature, suppose I'm I have some sort of weird belief that I was created by Globzor to, end the universe. Like, I think that's my teleology. Like, that would be wrong, And so there would be like an objective fact about what I sort of ought to be doing as what I am, as myself.
Right.
What I, properly speaking, ought to be doing,
Sure.
which is not up to me desire wise. So I think, I mean, as far as I understood the debate, the debates that you previously had, that like does that not satisfy the sort of stance independence and you
It
know
does. Yeah.
so yeah,
I
okay,
know
great,
I'm
yeah,
not
so
taking issue
yeah,
with the so I agree you can have
yeah,
like these
yeah,
quote
great,
naturalist moral realisms that have stance
sure,
independent, but it comes at the cost of
okay,
what I take to be triviality. I don't that's not to say
yeah,
anything you're saying is false. What I'll be
yeah,
specific about what I mean when I say
yeah,
trivial. I just mean
okay, great,
roughly something like that nobody upon hearing what you mean would actually disagree with what you're saying. Like there's no one who's going to actually understand that and object to it, really. It's it's like
um
saying like if your position turns out just saying like
yeah,
bachelors are married men, but it's like hard to see that's what it's saying. It's like anyone who actually has that explained clearly either
mm,
already believes
yeah,
that or will come to
yeah,
believe it immediately the second they realize it and find it
yeah,
completely uninteresting. So that's like what
yeah,
I mean
yeah,
by
sure,
trivial. And one other
um
thing, I
yeah,
just wanted to reply to what you said where
mm,
about the facts about ourselves. So just to be clear, all that you were saying with all that would be something and I don't mean to be like like reductive or whatever, but to all
yeah,
you're saying.
fantastic, yeah,
But all you're saying is just that like if the definition of Matt is like one who watches lots of porn or something like that, like you're
yeah,
failing to meet your teleology right now, and it doesn't matter what you think or what
yeah,
you believe is good for you, like philosophy. So
yeah,
that again, that's true. Nobody would disagree with that. Like if Matt
yeah,
is
sure,
defined as
yeah,
one who watches porn and you're not watching porn, you're like failing to meet. Yeah, yeah. So I
yeah,
agree with everything you're saying, but I
right,
think no one
so
would really disagree once you
yeah.
make it
So
clear.
but what I would say in addition to that is that, so some definitions uh are more properly true of me than others, right? So
What is that?
like
Wait. Once. Okay, sorry. I don't mean to. One other thing, I should have
yeah,
responded to the
yeah,
natural kind stuff. That's actually why I started
yeah,
speaking at the start. Was that I wanted to
yeah.
flag. So we could just. I still have some further time if you want to just shift topic and go to the natural kind stuff. And maybe it connects to the morality, but I think
Yeah.
everything you've said about morality, I can get on board with that. So we
All
might
right.
just be effectively like it sounds like we can agree on the topic of moral realism. I can talk about something else like natural kinds, but does your realism
Yeah.
like require natural kinds or something like that? Because I'm
I
understanding it
think it
right
I
now.
think it does. So a
Okay.
risk with my view, which I think you might be sort of approaching at the moment, is that, again, it is trivial if I could just jury rig together a definition to specify whatever teleology I want, right? Like that's not action guiding, if okay, fine, you say I'm not fulfilling my criteria as a human, why should I want to be a human? I define myself as an inhuman, right? Or whatever. Uh, you know, I don't define myself as a rational animal. I define myself as an agent of Globzor here to end the universe, right? That would sort of make it trivial as a moral theory, but that's not what I think, right? So I think that amongst all the categorizations that you could give, some categorizations are truer than others. Some more accurately describe who and what I really am, and I should act, I as what I really am ought to act in accordance with, what I really am, rather than some sort of fake categorization or jury rigged or incomplete or sort of radically incomplete one, right? So that means that not all definitions are made equal. I think some definitions carve reality at the joints and others do not, and we should conceive of our teleologies according to those definitions which do carve reality at the joints, which do accurately approach our genuine constitutions. Uh, so I don't know, does that make it less trivial in your view, or does it still seem odd?
Well, I guess I'm not sure. Like I guess I have to think it through. So like
Mm,
we have definitions, and you want to say there
mm,
is some sense in which one definition is more correct than another definition, and it's the most
yes.
correct definition at least in principle, even if we don't have
Mm.
access to it or whatever. But it's the most correct definition that actually prescribes our teleological ends for us. And there's a fact of the matter
Yeah.
that's not contingent on our minds about what the right definition is.
Yes. So let me give you an example, right?
Let me
So
react to that
suppose.
before your example.
Oh, sorry.
Just the kind of thing that I view that as, from my point of view, is that
Mm,
the spookiness of stance independence is being pushed back a step. It's like when you go like,
mm.
who created God,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm going to kind of do that here, because I'm going
Yeah.
to go, okay, now the stance independently true thing is the definition, and you're deriving the thing
Mm,
that
yeah.
would initially seem spooky, normally the teleological
Yeah.
stuff, from this
Mm,
definition. So if you look just from the
yeah.
definition forward in your deduction, nothing seems off. But
Mm,
going a step before that and asking
yeah.
about what makes definitions correct, then we find ourselves, I think, back at the kind of thing
Yeah.
that spooks me out a bit. So you
Yeah.
got out of
Sure.
spooking me
Great.
out by saying it's just a matter of definition, and then I agreed with you. But yeah,
Yeah. 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 Sure. Yeah. I was hoping we'd reach that. Sorry, my screen's just turned off for a second. Okay. No, I got it. Right.
no,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
okay.
So yeah. So let me give you an example of what I mean by like a false or merely nominal definition versus a real definition, right? So a real definition, in my view, maps onto real divisions and constitutions that actually exist in the world, and false ones are just jury-rigged for whatever temporary interest we have. So, for example, the object constituted by me and the moon, right? I don't think there is any such object. There's me, there's the moon, there are certain relations between us, but there's no such object that just includes me and the moon, right? I can talk about it linguistically, but that wouldn't be mapping onto anything that actually exists as a real unity. There's no one
Th-
thing
Yeah,
such
that
that it is me and the moon.
yeah,
Whereas
I
I am not that sort of thing, right? I am one thing whether or not anyone understands it, and insofar as anyone approaches me with a definition that specifies me as a single being unto myself, that would be a better way of carving reality at the joints. That would be a better way of reflecting what reality sort of is. So in that sense, that's
yeah.
a
So
real definition.
it sounds like you're some kind of mereological principlist who's going to basically say that there's
Mm.
rules for object construction, and
Yeah.
when we're constructing definitions, that's sort of either an analog or some subcase. I don't know exactly how you do that, but it's like that saying. It's like
Mm.
mereology. It's like object construction, and there's
Yeah.
these certain rules about object construction, and whatever exactly they are, we could talk about what they are, but that's not really the point. But whatever they are,
Mm.
they rule out things like you, moon, from being an object, and they allow
Mm.
things like you and moon to be objects. And
Yes.
then it's according to these correctly constructed objects that we derive our definitions, and then according to those correct definitions that we derive our teleology, and then you construct the
Right.
definition of morality. So it's a big layer
Yeah.
cake of a view you've got here, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
which is fine. I like that.
neo-scholasticism, right? Yeah.
No, I'm
Yeah.
always, even if I disagree, I like when someone actually has built up like a edifice and you get to like look at it. It's more interesting than like someone just like rambling. I feel like I have a lot of really bad conversations. Okay, yeah. So the problem
Mm.
for me is, again, now we're just thrice pushing back the thing that creeps me out. What determines the correct rules, the correct mereological uh, principles for object construction? I guess that's redundant, because all mereological. What determines these correct principles for object construction? Why is it correct that you can make an object like you, but you can't make an object like you, moon?
Mm. That is a good question. Let me just think about it for a second. How would I
I am a
answer it
man of many
in
questions.
a clear sort of way?
Hmm.
Let me think.
Sure.
Because I could answer it in a way that brings in extra metaphysical concepts, but I'm trying not. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to stick
It's
with
your
just what
choice.
we've got.
That it'll blow
Yeah.
up more of the discussion into further areas of disagreement. So it might not be
Yeah. Yeah.
optimal,
Yeah.
but if you have to, you have to.
Yeah. So yeah, okay, whatever. It's just easier for me to just just vomit metaphysics.
Yeah.
So basically, I think So I think that sort of fundamentally there are such things as mereological wholes composed of parts, and that the only way that this is intelligible is if there is some actuality to the whole that is not sort of fully encapsulated just by talking about its parts considered severally, and that when we construct our definition, at least when we're trying to carve up the world, right? So sometimes when we construct definitions, we're not trying to carve up the world at all. But when we try to describe the world as it is, what we're trying to do is we are trying to conform our language to these real actualities, and we detect them when we detect, generally, when we detect repeated phenomena, when we detect patterns in things, and those patterns seem to be best explained by some sort of, stable, sort of, some sort of stable principle that produces it, right? So I observe things sort of,
Sorry, explained by a
yeah.
stable principle that produce. Are you talking about something that is simultaneously caused and explained, I guess? But are you using those interchangeably? To cause something and to
Well,
explain something?
causation is, I guess, one kind of explanation. Because I'm conscious that I'm a neo-scholastic. So when I mean cause, I mean like one of the four causes: formal, material, final, or efficient, right?
Oh,
Whereas when
that's
you say
like,
cause, you might mean, yeah.
is that Anselm? Who's or
No,
Aquinas?
it's Aristotle,
Uh,
but it's
it is
through
Aristotle.
Aquinas. Yeah,
Oh,
it is
right.
Aristotle, through Aquinas. Yeah, I mean neo-scholastic, right? I put my chips on
Was it
the table.
popularized by Aquinas?
It was popularized in Christendom by Aquinas, but the Muslims took it on,
Okay.
the
I'm just
pagans took it on. So
trying to redeem
yeah,
myself. No. Okay, all right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
so yeah, but I still don't get it. What
yeah,
is the so I understand that there's something about you Moon that's
yeah,
like failing to carve nature up
yeah,
like I have a vague notion of what people for again, I should
yeah,
flag I have a view
yeah,
where like massive amounts of
yeah,
concepts in contemporary philosophy are just gibberish. I think like natural
yeah,
kinds, naturalism, physicalism, moral realism, metaphysical modality. There's a bunch of concepts that I
yeah,
think are literally gibberish. So I have a vague idea, and again, that's not to say you can't like you. I'm happy to hear what you have to say about them.
yeah.
But from my point of view, I'm not. I have a vague idea about what people mean by natural kinds. I know the kind of language they'll use to describe something, but I have no clue how I can. I look at you and I look at you, Moon. Why is one a natural kind and the other isn't?
Well, because so like the sort of pithy answer to that is that I exist and Nemoon does not, right? It's just
Well, that's begging the
there is,
question, though.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But at least that's the sort of, that's where I sort of want to arrive at, right? Well, like
Well, that
whatever it
yeah,
is that makes me a
sure, of
thing,
course,
yeah,
that's where you want
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
arrive.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
literally the
yeah,
thing
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
asking.
yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean it's still helpful to like lay it out so we can sort of
I'm
work our
just
way
teasing.
towards it.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm just fucking around. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, sure. Um, yeah, um,
Because you wouldn't want to like
yeah,
what I'm really confused about is how to get to
yeah.
P. Well, the trite way that I could describe how to get to P is well, P is the case. You're like, okay, well, I
Yeah.
need something more than that, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I was in the middle, I think, at some point of describing like an epistemic procedure, that how you get that. So you observe a sort of a repeated set of occurrences. You hypothesize an underlying principle that stably gives rise to that occurrence. You
So
test it,
stop.
and you
Wait,
figure
one
out
sec.
that
Gives rise
uh,
causally.
well, gives rise causally or I think explanatorily is what I mean, but it might. Yeah, that's sorry, that's where we dived into causes.
You
Yeah, so
observe a phenomena.
yeah,
You
yeah,
look at what the explanation is of you look at what
yeah,
best
of
explains
why
it.
yeah, sure, yes. And sometimes what best explains it is that there is something, right, which some
Sorry,
principle,
and Matt.
some singular object. Yeah,
One sec. I'm
yeah,
getting like fucked in like 8 million different ways here. When you
yeah,
say that something explains it, the
yeah,
thing to explain something the thing that does explaining is a proposition, right?
Maybe we don't agree. Let me
Yeah, because
see.
to say a definition explains something, I'm like, what is going on in this conversation? I understand how
Oh,
propositions
I see.
explain
I
things.
see. Sorry. Sorry, give me a sec. I'm
Sure.
going to look up the exact proper.
Yeah, because if you're like the correct definition is the one that properly explains things, I'm like, what the fuck does it mean for a definition to explain? I understand how propositions can explain. I also would not know what it means for a definition to cause something.
Okay, I see. Sorry, I'm just too used to talking in a different context. I forgot that analytics talk about it in a different way.
Yeah, I get reminded that there's
So yeah,
Caribbean people every once in a while when I talk to continentals. It's okay.
yeah, that's fine.
I'm joking.
I'm
I'm
not a
joking.
continental, but yeah, just to be clear. Yeah. So by explanation, I mean a thing capable of supporting what you would call explanatory statements,
Okay,
right?
and by a
Uh,
thing is a thing a proposition?
no, a thing is like an object of some kind.
So it can be
So
a definition?
yeah, yeah. So classically it would be a form, right? So a form is what grounds the definition of a man. Right?
Sorry, don't
So
mind the
sorry,
constant
I don't know
interruption,
if you
but
know. Yeah,
it's for a reason though. Often when I'm cutting in,
yeah,
it's because a word has been invoked that I don't have in
yeah,
my
yeah.
lexicon.
Great.
So again,
Yeah,
I'm aware of grounding talk. I know what
yeah,
metaphysicians say about grounding. It's not like I
yeah.
literally don't know what the word means, but grounding is one of those words that I think is gibberish. I don't know what it means to ground.
So
So if you
ground.
invoke that,
So
that'll open it up.
have you heard the truth maker account of grounding? I'm roughly happy with that. Do you know?
Um,
Uh,
I think that Darren holds
So
a view like that. I don't. You want to go
yeah,
over it?
yeah, sure. So just generally, and I'm not a specialist in grounding, but this is just how I understand the term, right?
Mhm.
It's that X is grounded in Y if Y is the thing in reality that makes the proposition X true.
Oh yeah, makes X true. What it like?
Yeah.
I
So
have a hard
truth.
time
So truth.
understanding.
Yeah. So correspondence theory of truth, does that help? That to which the true statement corresponds.
No, of course, we have such opposite like overall philosophical approaches. It's so funny. You'll be like, does this concept help? I'll be like, oh, that's another thing that's like on the total other end of the spectrum than how I think about philosophy. I'm
Yeah.
not sure correspondence theory is even coherent. I don't know
Yeah.
what
Interesting.
terms
Yeah.
like really true or anything means. That's always seemed very like strange to me.
Right. So
Um,
you're some kind of coherentist, something like that?
no, I'm not committing to coherentism.
Right.
When we talk about truth, I don't know that I even have a theory of truth. I'm not sure I could articulate a theory of truth.
Hmm.
I
But
have a
you're
bit
pretty
more
sure that
formed of
correspondence doesn't work.
I don't understand correspondence. I find correspondence unintelligible because it invokes this notion of how things really are. I don't really
Hmm.
understand what that means. There's ways with a lot of these things there's ways you can cash it out where it'll make sense to me, but it's like so frequently construed in a way that doesn't, and if I give the construal that makes sense, rejected by the person who proposed it initially, that
Hmm.
I just flag it as something that I'm like very skeptical about.
Right. Okay.
But
Sure.
we don't have to get into course because you just mentioned
Yeah.
it as a potential thing to prompt me into understanding what you're saying. But yeah, that might not be the
Yeah.
most helpful. So yeah, I guess
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
we're trying to understand. I just want to keep track of where we are. So we remember
Mm,
the whole first part of how we got here, but now we're trying to
yeah.
understand what oh, why are we talking about grounding and explanation and stuff again? How did we get here?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Oh
I
yeah,
was trying
because
to
we went
explain what
all
it
those
is. Yeah.
layers. Sorry, I do
Yeah.
remember now. We go all those fucking
Yeah.
layers deep, and then right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Okay. In that case, we are going to get into a whole thing about grounding, unless you have another term to describe it. I
Uh.
don't find
Yeah.
grounding
Yeah.
understandable.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just sort of restate the context so we can orient ourselves better. Um,
Sure.
so yeah. So we're talking about grounding now because I was trying to articulate what it is that makes some definitions merely nominal and others real, right?
Yes.
So I'm saying that real definitions
Are grounded.
correspond to yeah are grounded in reality, how things actually are.
Hmm.
Whereas nominal definitions are mere linguistic constructions that are useful for manipulating things or useful for whatever random purposes that we may take into our brains, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I
Um,
ask
yeah.
to that,
Yeah.
how is it that the you moon doesn't reflect how things really are, but you does?
Yeah, and I'm saying that I have a unifying form that unites all my bits actually, right? Which is not a matter of projection. Whereas there is no such form as far as we can discern between me and the moon, and we can't discern one because there's not sufficient motivation for one, and there's not sufficient motivation for one because that nothing about the relation between me and the moon um, requires positing a unity of which me and the moon are parts. There's no, for example, irreducible um, power that's associated between me and the moon that can't just be reduced to the powers of me and the moon considered severally, for
Whoa,
instance.
whoa, whoa, whoa! Wait, now we're talking about powers. Are we talking? Okay, holy shit!
Yeah,
Causal powers?
yeah, causal powers, causal capacities. Right. So one of the
Yeah.
most common ways to
Wait.
detect,
Sorry, just before. Wait 1 second.
yeah,
Let's just try to stay on this one thing I'm a
sure,
bit stuck with. You might be going too quick for me. So,
yeah,
you moon is illegitimate. Why? Because it doesn't reflect how
uh,
things really are? And if that's the answer,
yes.
why does it not reflect how things really are?
Yes, because there is no need to posit some one thing of which I and the moon are parts, which can't be just as well described in terms of the powers of me or the powers or features of me and the moon considered individually. Right. So again,
Well,
it's
wait,
similar to
whoa,
it's
whoa,
similar.
whoa. That's
So me and the moon. Maybe this might help. Me and the moon can be completely reduced to me and the moon without positing an extra object on top of it, right? So, whereas I think that so in this sense, I'm not even sure that the moon is an object, right? I don't know if the moon can be uh, resist complete reduction to the features of its constituents. But I think at least I am that because I actually exist, or so it seems to me. And sort of if you consider what you consider my parts sort of severally, right? So as a collection, but not as unified into me, that's not me. You lose something about me. So in that sense, I would say that I exist, and I think that goes for things like plants. Maybe it goes for things like H2O, right? Water. Like water is a thing over and above just hydrogen and oxygen, and so forth. So anything that resists reduction, basically, to the degree that resists reduction, implies that there is a real thing there, which is distinct from other things, and therefore has conditions of its distinction, which
Wait, sorry, one
has
sec. To be clear, does
yeah.
does real is real just a synonym for resist reduction? Or is that a property you get if something resists reduction?
So right, hmm. So resist reduction is a means for detecting the real. So I do think real is sort of prior to resist reduction. Yeah. So
Okay,
a
it's
thing
well,
has to be
okay.
real in order a thing has to be real in order to resist reduction.
Okay, yeah, because the thing is,
Yeah.
if they just meant the same thing, then there would be
Yeah.
one concept to clear up, but now there's two. So I don't know
Yeah.
what exactly it
Oh
means
dear.
to resist reduction.
And you don't
And
understand what it means to be
and
real, at least
well,
according to me.
no, definitely not. So if and there's two
Mm.
steps because just understanding what it means to resist reduction won't get me to what you mean by real because you don't think it means the same thing as resist reduction. You think it's some property that you get in the case that there's resistance of reduction. So I need to understand
Yeah.
what it means to resist reduction, and then from there, I guess I need to understand what it means for something to be real. Like, what's it mean to resist reduction? Like, U Moon's not going to be U Moon anymore if I take away like you or Moon from it, right? Is it resisting reduction?
No, well, so a thing resists reduction if it can be completely redescribed in terms of just its constituents. Right,
What?
so you think about like element. So you're familiar with like eliminativism in philosophy of mind.
Hmm.
Yeah. So like, if eliminativism were true, then it wouldn't be the case that minds exist, right? They would be they would not resist reduction. They'd be susceptible to a very extreme form of reduction. And hence, they wouldn't be real objects. They'd just be nominal objects grouped together for our convenience, right?
Um, Wait,
Or under a folk
reduction.
concept.
Sorry, what? Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so a thing resists reduction if it can't be completely redescribed in terms of just the properties of its underlying constituents, right? So if, for
Can't
example,
be
something like,
redescribed in terms of the properties of its
yeah,
under. Okay, right. So like if I
yeah,
if I start describing you in terms of like your like molecules and all that kind of stuff, part some
yeah,
information is lost, right? That's
yeah,
the idea.
something would be lost. Yes, exactly.
Okay, so that's another substantive claim there. So I
Yeah,
that now that I do understand what you mean by resist reduction. That's coherent to me that if you describe you have some whole that's built of composite parts, and if you describe all the
mm,
composite parts and you describe the whole, maybe in some cases you end up describing the same thing,
yeah,
but in others information is lost, and it's the cases where
yeah,
information is lost that you
yeah,
can't quote reduce. So that's
yes,
clear. That makes sense to
right,
me. But,
great.
wait, just let me remember my follow-up 1 second. So,
Mm.
um, so there are things that sorry, you need to give me a second to remember where we are in the dialectic.
No, no worries, no worries. Take your time.
Um, there are things that resist reduction. Yeah, right, but, okay, yeah, so I can grant that there are things that resist reduction, but then if you want to say you are one of them, that is gonna
Mm,
be a further claim, but I don't know if you want to actually
yeah,
go down the road of justifying
yeah.
that, or if you can just, now that you have your definition on the table, proceed with whatever you're trying to get to initially with the natural kinds and how it relates to realism.
Right. Well, let's if we're just trying to figure out what natural kinds are and that kind of thing. Let's set me aside for now, right? Maybe I don't really exist, at least according to this sort of notion of what it is to really exist, to be irreducible. Uh, so yeah, so that's yeah. So anyway, you understand resist reduction, great. So if there is information lost, then that which is lost surely has like intrinsic conditions of distinction, right? So you have to distinguish between what is lost and what isn't lost, right? There's a sort of intrinsic principle of what it is, what information is lost. Would that be the, would you agree with that?
That if information is lost, that
Yes.
some inform
Then
I don't know,
yeah,
what yeah.
then there has to be some uh distinction built into the nature of the information that is lost, which distinguishes what is lost from everything else, right? Which is so because that
What is
specifies
lost has to
itself.
be it has to be like a coherent thing to be lost. It can't be
Yeah,
like blah, 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 blah. It's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
gotta be a
Obviously, yeah,
thing.
yeah, and if it is a coherent thing, then it has intrinsic like criteria of differentiation, i.e., between itself and everything else, right? Uh,
Who's that from? Is that fucking a Hegel thing? Like, I'm fine with
uh,
that, yeah, but is
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
Hegel?
It's not. So, as far as I know, I'm just reproducing Aristotle, right? This is from the Metaphysics. This
Okay.
is him trying to get at why there should be such things as form and matter. I'm adapting it to a modern sort of dialectical context. But that's the roadmap I'm working with in the back of my brain. So you'll find
Okay.
that a lot of this, yeah, like so for example, my sort of to achieve your ends is to achieve the end that corresponds to your real definition. Like that sort of thing, you find it's a thing that occurs throughout philosophy. It starts with Plato even or Socrates. Socrates asks, what is justice, right? And what are the ends appropriate to it? And you get like guys like Kant, who would be maybe one of the guys who you find a lot of trouble seeing where he's coming from. But when he thinks what is the nature of rational action, he's saying, well, let's define rational action and then see what ends and behaviors sort of follow from our definition. right? And given that this is a privileged definition, this describes what rational agents really are. Aha, I've got something that compels all rational agents to conform. So I think everyone, in some sense, has some everyone who is a moral realist has some kind of commitment to something in this vicinity. But I'm trying to explain it, in our present context. Anyway,
Well,
sorry, that
I
was a
think you're
big.
being clear. No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, I just that specific quote that for something to be is for it to have
Mm,
properties such that it's distinguished from the rest of the things around. I was just curious who that's from.
yeah.
That's some thinker. It might be from
Oh,
Aristotle. Maybe it
sorry.
is from
That
Aristotle. I
yes.
thought it was
Sorry,
him.
that's not. Yeah, yeah. That's not a quote. So I think if you look for the exact words, you won't find them. It's just that the thought, the underlying thought is not even Aristotle. Is from like Socrates.
Okay.
Through Plato. So it's basically all Western philosophy. Sort of roughly starts with that thought.
So
But anyway.
here's the thing. I think that
Yeah.
what's happening is, have you ever seen that game that kids play where they have their hands and you put one on top of the other and you try to be the top hand and you keep pulling it out from the bottom
Mm,
to put on the top?
yeah. Yeah.
I think we're kind of doing that. So I think
Yeah.
that you give a construal of realism. It has
Mm,
some kind of aspect to it that seems to me a little spooky. Then I press and you give a construal that I think is fine. I'm like, okay, I'm a realist by that definition. But then you're like,
mm,
no, not yet. And then you add something else. Then I initially
yeah.
bulked it, but then I ask
Mm,
again, and it also seems to reduce down to something that I understand.
mm,
And I think we're having that again here with this idea
yeah.
of rules for like object construction and all this stuff. Like
Yeah.
you can just say like, look, there's things that reduce and things that don't, and setting aside what cases those actually are, if you agree that's coherent conceptually, it's at least in principle
Mm,
possible to have that division. That's all I need. I don't care
mm,
if you can actually point
yeah.
out things like that or not. Um,
Great.
but then I'm just going, okay, well, sure. So there is some, like, he can talk about the correct way to define, the correct rules for object construction from which he gets the correct definition, from which he gets the correct teleology, from which he builds the concept of morality. You can
Mm,
do all that. But again, once you start talking at this point about, once you started talking about how, how to ground out those those rules for object construction, it
mm,
sounded again like you weren't saying anything that is like objectionable really to me.
okay.
To be so for you want to
Mm,
say that, yeah, you just want to, so we might disagree about where there is and isn't reduction possible, but again, I'm not going to be like,
mm,
prove you can't be like, I'll just go with the concept, that's fine. So yeah, but on
yeah.
that construal, again, it just turns out being analytic, and I'm going to
Mm,
agree. But I think that's coming at the expense of saying something trivial. I don't think anyone will disagree with, if I just say, it might take someone a moment to understand what's being said because there's layers of concepts going on. But at the end of the
mm,
day, if it's just like, hey, there's like rules for how you make a concept correctly. On my use of the term correctly here, to make a
mm,
concept correctly is to make it in such a way that it's like not susceptible to reduction. Those definitions that aren't susceptible to reduction and have bits about something's ends in
yeah.
them, those are what I mean by that thing's teleology, those ends
Mm,
that are in the definition. And to act correctly morally, I know you had some other clause, but it was like loosely to act in line with the teleology. There's something about the will,
yeah.
but like forget that for a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
So that, if anyone understands what you're saying, they're just going to understand that's an analytic statement. You're saying something that's true by definition, given how you're defining your terms. So again, I'm not going to object, but I think it
Yeah.
falls into what I would call trivial moral realism.
Okay. Interesting. Um. Hmm. So if we go as far as all that, um, like I mean, obviously, like I can still say something controversial, right? So I would say, well, the kind of character that genuinely characterizes you is, for example, to be a rational animal. Another person might disagree. Well, no, I'm a subject of Globzor, or I am, a Christian or whatever. And these sorts of things are going to be like that. Yeah, they go. but then they can have a substantive debate over, well, what really is in my interest, properly speaking, right? So they'll sort of lose the idea that my interests are just whatever I understand myself to desire, right? They'll start burrowing into, well, what's the objective nature of human beings? What's the what actually exists? What actually am I? And how do I live in accordance with that? And it seems to me like that's really what the moral realist sort of wants, right? Like some principle which compels every agent, insofar as they are aware of reality, to sort of consider it and to adopt as sort of prior to everything else that they are and do.
Okay, so
So yeah,
I agree. I agree with you that what you just described right there is what moral realists want. They want something that
yeah,
is somehow binding, whatever that means. But it's like it
yes,
has force, whatever the fuck that is, and it has force on you whether you like it or not. That's the
yeah,
core of what moral realists want.
yeah,
So that
yeah,
I agree with. But I don't think you're
yeah,
getting that here, because I
right,
can go, oh sure, I know what it means to like correctly align with my own
mm,
teleology on Matt's view, given some like definition of myself, and I don't give
mm.
a fuck. Like I'm gonna go eat ice cream or something like that. Like
Yeah,
what? So
sure,
when you say that it would compel people or bind them in any way,
yeah,
that I don't see any reason to
yeah,
believe at all.
great. Yeah, great.
But
So
that's a
I
separate.
think,
I do want to flag. Sorry, before you
yeah,
explain, I do want to flag. That's a separate. We're now moving to a separate question, not about whether realism is true. We've agreed. Unless you want to do more, trying to
mm,
put more stuff that freaks me out into the view. I think we can agree on realism being true as you defined it, but now
yes,
we're moving to a separate question. This I don't think is going to affect whether realism is true or not, and this is just a question
okay,
about um. Oh, I forgot what it was. Whatever we were about to talk about, but I just want to
mm.
flag that it's a fresh discussion, that we're not still like this doesn't affect the realism thing. I think we
Oh,
agree
okay,
on the
okay,
realism
okay,
bit.
sure,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
okay,
sorry. The whether there's any quote
yeah,
normative force. That's like a separate question,
yeah,
right? You could be a realist and think that. You could be a realist and not think that. And I think
yeah,
I'm going to agree with your realism as defined didn't mention normative force. It's not analytically connected, so I can just
mm.
grant the realism, but not grant the normative force bit. I don't know if you want to move
Great.
into a further
Yeah,
discussion. We
okay,
can
yeah,
talk about that for a few.
I'm actually, yeah. So when I was listening to your previous discussions, it was actually normative force that I really thought about, like how I would try to articulate such a concept to you, who seems to like lack any concept of how it works, right? And I was really unsatisfied with a lot of what I heard, like, oh, you just know, bro. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, I really
So,
like Joe a lot, but I don't think the arguments for realism are good.
yeah, yeah, I like him too. I've had a few exchanges with him myself.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah. Uh, so what was I? What was I? Yeah. So I think that I would say there's a. Okay, actually, hold on. Let me think about it.
Sure.
So the sense in which it is binding is not the sense in not in a sort of so I think what moral realists generally want to say, and what I want to say, is that there is a sense in which moral norms are binding, even though they aren't binding in the sort of coercive sense or the manipulative sense, right? In the sense of like producing a result. And like what sense that would be is precisely the problem. And my sort of tentative answer to that is that rather than a sorry, I'm gonna use some Aristotelian language which you can unpack later. Rather than be a sort of efficient causal restriction, uh, moral norms restrict uh, as as teloi, right, as ends. So when I sort of set out to build a building, right, there is something innate to the end that I pursue, which constrains my action, right? So to build a building, I cannot like build just a ceiling, right? That just doesn't work
Hmm.
under our conditions. So the end, in a sense, constrains me, and so having supporting a ceiling, say if that's the kind of building I want to build, like that imposes a norm on me, right? So normative force just is the force, the kind of constraint exerted by the end of an action upon the actor that is pursuing that action. That's
So
what I would
it's
say.
not a
Yeah,
psychological thing, which is what I think most
yeah,
people want
yeah,
normative force to have a psychological component. Like
yeah,
obviously some won't. You'll have people like Derek Parfit who will say that you know, you can have like these objective moral facts that have no motivational properties at all
Yeah,
associated with them, which has
yeah,
always struck me as like just the most hilarious thing. Like, so you're telling me that
yeah,
like become aware of like the true morality and just say whatever and
yeah,
go like rape people? It seems kind of weird, but yeah, okay. So if
yeah.
you if you are just let me think for a sec. So if
Mhm,
all we mean by binding is that I'm failing to be a given thing correctly according to some definition, so like, you know, if part of the definition of Isaac is to like be a moral realist, I'm like doing a bad job of being Isaac.
mm,
If the
yeah,
force is just the fact that that statement is true, that there's something I'm failing
mm,
at, that's fine. I
yeah,
don't disagree with that. I'm sure I'm failing at doing a
yeah,
whole range of things. I'm succeeding at like I'm failing to like ballet
yeah,
dance right now. I'm succeeding at like
yeah,
sitting at my computer. If
yeah.
on the other hand it's supposed to be psychological, I see absolutely no reason to believe
Right.
there's any psychological force to
Yeah,
this.
yeah. So if by psychological force you mean some like
I'll clarify what
some
I mean. I mean that
yeah,
someone
sure.
becomes aware of this and they
Yeah,
form the desire to do it.
yeah. Well, okay. So are you saying that in no case that happens, or just that it doesn't happen in every case?
The latter, yeah.
Sure. But I think that yeah. So maybe let's just give a case where it does happen, right? So in my case, for instance, this is sort of speaking from personal experience. I used to have a very sort of life of the mind intellectualist kind of affectation, right? I neglected the physical in order to pursue the mental. I thought, yes, this is what I really want. This is what I really am most suited for. Therefore, I won't go to the gym. I won't, you know, I'll pay attention to my diet only insofar as it supports my only insofar as it supports my current habits, right?
Right.
But at some point, I became an Aristotelian. I became aware that, hey, I'm not just this brain floating in a void, right? I am a rational animal. The animal is part of me. And seeing that animal as part of me, and then realizing that as myself, you know, if I want to even to be me is already to have an underlying orientation towards pursuing this thing, right? So being able to see myself as genuinely a physical animal lets me assimilate those interests to my psychological self, right? My self representation of myself. And so, you know, when I'm aware of my self representation as an attempt at reflecting what I really am, then, you know, the interests of the real me suddenly become very relevant to me, right? And like, you know, in practice, this worked out to me. Well, okay, the gym actually does fulfill me in a way that I can now understand. I've made a discovery about what my interests are, so now I will pursue them, right? So that's the sense in which I think it's meant to have persuasive psychological force. Um,
Yeah, so I don't doubt that it could have that, but not
mm,
like reliably. It certainly doesn't like when you say it has it,
yeah,
I take it that it's not supposed to be some accidental feature. Like if I say my car can go 300 miles per hour, but what I
yeah,
mean is actually like, well, like if you just use
mm,
like the gas in the motor, it'll go like 120. But like if you shoot it out of like a high speed like aircraft or something, it'll go faster. It's like, um, sorry, let me just think about
mm,
how to say this. There might be some condition where it goes that quickly, but it's kind of like a fluke, right? It's not really like we wouldn't want to say like cars like mine are cars that go 300 miles per hour. We'd be like
mm,
a car like mine is one that could like randomly go 300 miles per hour if you shot it out of like a fucking jet or something like this, or like a space cannon. Um, so if I guess I'm just trying to say there's like this kind of accidentalness to the moral
mm,
compulsion on that you're talking about here. Like if all you
mm.
mean is like, hey, I reflect and I notice like I
Yeah,
reflect on a definition of
yeah,
myself that includes being an
yeah,
animal and realize what ends that has, and I think about that, and that reflection prompts me to have some psychological change. Like sure, but that's like I mean I could
yeah.
have that by just like I eat like a really good bagel and I just like reflect on the bagel and I was like like That like vegan
Yeah.
cream cheese was really good, and
Yeah.
like maybe part of myself is to like be one who likes cream cheese. And if that really is my goal, maybe I should spend more time thinking through the right cream cheeses to eat. Like that's fine, but
Mm.
as long as you're
Yeah.
granting it's just some kind of accidental thing, it's not really a property that these
Yeah.
moral things have in of themselves, I guess, if that language is okay.
Hmm. So I guess what I'm saying is that like when when I make that discovery about my interests in physical development, or at least not in in staving off physical degeneration at my age, you know, it's not just you know an and a quirk of my personality that I agree with it, right? What I want to say is that I'm operating according to the oh man, I'm going to introduce another concept here. The proper functioning of my
I hate that.
self-representation.
I
Yeah,
fucking
yeah,
hate
yeah. I
proper
know, I
function
know,
more
I
than
know,
anything.
I know,
That
I know.
term triggers me.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so but again, we're just doing the
Yeah,
fucking hand game. You're gonna say
yeah,
proper
yeah,
function,
yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna ask what that
yeah,
means, and then it's
yeah,
just gonna have
yeah.
some
And I'm gonna,
reductive, like,
yeah.
psychological explanation of like, "Okay, sure, you can have
Well,
that, and why does anyone have to care about that?" And they could just accidentally care about it like my
well,
car could accidentally go 300 miles per hour.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and well, I would say, well, the accidental cares that they have do not, unlike their proper functions, stem from their intrinsic principle of real definition, right? Which, uh, what makes them them? It doesn't stem from them properly speaking. It stems from them only accidentally speaking, right? So
But
I
again,
want,
we're not
yeah.
to be
So
clear, we're
as myself, I want to be me. That to me, yeah, that that's my sort of foundational premise. And so whatever it is that really does belong to me, I will want to do, right? And I think that everyone, insofar as they are what they are, sort of has a basic constitutive disposition to be them what they are. That's just what it
Yeah,
is to be
but
them.
this
Yeah,
is all I think I broadly like I get
yeah,
what's happening, I think I would say
yeah.
at this point in
Great.
this conversation. Like I understand
Yeah,
where we're diverging. Like cuz
yeah,
again, like I'm not even tempted at this point to like normally I'd hear proper function be like what do you mean by proper but like I know what you're going to do cuz I have a sense of the pattern that's happening now. Like if I ask
yeah.
what you mean by
Right.
that, we'll get some account of it that's like kind of reductive or psychological or like makes enough sense to me, and then I'll say like, yeah, that's fine. And according to that notion, maybe someone's like not meeting their proper function if they're behaving in some conventionally
Yeah,
immoral way.
yeah.
But like, no one needs to care remotely about that, right? You could tell
Oh,
me my proper function is like to, go and like fight a war in like Nepal or something, and I'm just not going to
yeah.
go like wage war on Nepal. I'm just going to like not care and like do like philosophy and computer science and stuff. So I think
Sure.
broadly like I'm
Yeah,
happy to talk a bit more. I'm
yeah,
probably gonna go in 10, 15 or so. But
yeah. No
I
worries.
think broadly and I think like your view is interesting, and
Mm,
I think it has one property that's a bit undesirable, which is
mm.
it has this property of looking like it's saying something more substantial metaphysically than it really is. It seems thick, it's very thin though when you actually press on it. So yeah, I think
Yeah, yeah,
well, maybe you disagree with that, but the pattern that
yeah,
I've sort of seen play out is it every time something thick seems to be deployed, once I do a bit of investigation, it turns out being a thin concept. To a point that I'm literally not even motivated to analyze further thick concepts that get invoked because I just know what's going to happen with them. So, yeah, I mean, I think that what you're saying is true and people will be immoral definitionally. It'll just be an analytic truth that they're being immoral if they do certain actions given certain
yeah.
definitions. That's all true.
Mm,
But I don't think this has to have any force for anyone. It could like randomly accidentally have force, like the bagel reflection might have force. But
yeah,
yeah, so that's roughly like where I'm at overall with this conversation.
yeah. So, by force, you just mean like persuasive force to the subject.
Yeah, well, I already granted if by force you yeah, I meant psychological force.
Yeah,
If by force you
yeah,
just mean something like force in the sense of I get to
yeah.
say you're wrong. Well, yeah, I mean, of course, if it's analytic that to be good, a good X is to phi, then if someone's not phying, they're not being a good X, right? Like
Mm,
that, she can have
yeah,
force like that. But what people
yeah,
normally care about when they talk about force is, I
yeah.
think it's got a psychological component to it. They
Is
want Well, if you don't agree, that's fine. But either way,
Yeah,
it's like I'll agree with the notion of force you put on the
yeah,
table if all it comes down to is something like we get to just tell them that they're wrong about X
mm,
and it's just some like analytic
yeah,
truth or whatever. Like
yeah,
that's kind of trivial.
yeah.
But if
Well,
the force
yeah.
is supposed to be psychological, then I haven't seen any reason
Mm.
to think it exists as a non-accidental thing. You
Well,
just might have those reflections
surely, like,
sometimes.
surely, like, insofar as agents are self-interested, and you can appeal to that self-interest by characterizing themselves better than they can, uh, that would have, some inherent psychological force, even if that force can be overwritten by other concerns, right?
Well, not necessarily, unless you're making some kind of analytic move there. Like I could give someone some definition that captures like their true nature, quote unquote. It's like that definition fits your like mereological principles and stuff. And
Mm.
sorry, I forgot what you just said, but if it was about it having force, I could give them one
Yeah,
that meets all those conditions, and then they
yeah,
just go, "Oh,
yeah,
okay," and like I'm gonna go
yeah.
rape someone now.
Well, they might because yeah, but at least you would, they wouldn't. Maybe they're doing so because they're not fully taking on board your argument, right? Or there's some other kind of failure. Maybe there's some
Well, wait,
pre-existing bad
let me say
habit.
something there. Let
They've,
me say something.
sorry, yeah,
They could accept everything I say as true and still do that.
mm.
Right? There's
Yeah,
nothing
and
there.
they
It's
could,
not like
yeah,
not
yeah.
that they have to be disagreeing
Well,
with me
yeah,
somewhere. They can
yeah,
grant everything
maybe
I
they have some sort of intervening habit, right? But it wouldn't be like, so, say, yeah, well, I just have a habit of raping people, so I'm just going to go indulge that now and ignore what you just said. Even if I accept that, yeah, that's a true characterization of what I am. But in that case, they simply would not be acting in their self-interest, right? And insofar as anyone is interested in avoiding, for example, cognitive dissonance and so forth, there would at least be some inherent psychological pressure in favor of like not doing not acting contrary to how you
Yeah,
understand yourself to really be.
I agree depending how you define self-interest. Like if you define self-interest such that it has the right kind of analytic connection to that which you desire or that which you're motivated to do, then again, it'll just come out analytic that you have some level of self-interest if
Mm.
you're made aware of your real, but again, you're just making an analytic move. That's not going to be interesting. Someone could grant that. They could say, oh yeah, so sorry.
Yeah,
So you're either taking a
yeah,
definition of self-interest that's like analytic with these things like how you understand yourself or the correct way to think about yourself, or you could have
mm,
some definition of self-interest that's not analytic with those things. On the definition, in the case where you do have that sort of analytic relationship, someone's
mm.
going to go, yeah, okay, then I would have to realize it's in my self-interest, but then they can just say, "And I have
Well, I define
absolutely
myself
no."
differently.
Well,
In Yeah,
they could just say,
uh,
"I'm aware of that, but I have no desire to do that," right?
well,
And
they
they're
couldn't say they have noticed because what if they accept that? Well, that's a true definition of me. Then at least on some level, they do have that inclination toward rationality and non-raping and so forth.
no, but
But they
if you
would just
do,
say, I
no,
don't
no,
care
no,
about that side. I don't
that's not
care about
right.
that side of myself. I
That's
care
not.
about some other side of myself.
No, I don't think that's right.
Okay, great.
Because
Yeah.
if you're using some definition of self-interest that's like analytic with these concepts about like mereological construction principles and all this kind of stuff,
Mm,
that's not what I mean when I use the word desire. So it's not gonna commit me to desiring having a self-interest in something. If self-interest is defined in a new way where it's not really connected to desire, then my desire is just
mm.
going to be able in principle to float free of my self-interest. So I'm kind of giving a dilemma. I'm
I
going like, if it's an analytic
Yeah.
connection between self-interest and all this like mereological principles, all that kind of stuff you're talking about, then okay, in the case where it's analytic, someone can grant that if these principles are all met, they're going to have the self-interest in doing this thing, but they can
Mhm.
at the same time say they'd have absolutely no desire while using the desire in the standard English way to do the thing, and they wouldn't do it, and they just go rape people. On the other hand, if by self-interest you mean something that's not analytic with all those things, maybe something closer to the like colloquial English usage, which by the way, using philosophical definitions I have no problem with, or proprietary
Yeah.
definitions. I'm
Yeah.
not taking a jab
Fair,
there. Um,
fair enough. Yeah.
then sure, on that definition, then it might not actually be the case that just because these mereological principles are met, they have a self-interest. So it's like analytic, you'll get the self-interest, but then someone can say they don't desire it. Not analytic, it's not even clear you'll get the self-interest.
Yeah, and I guess I would say like that sort of actually, hold on. So I think self-interest, at least, whatever definition you use, has some notion of the self, right? And unless, I guess, you define the self in such a way that it kind of, makes no reference to real definition, like, so suppose, it's just a sort of free-floating subjectivity, right? That doesn't have any roots in any underlying objectivity or an underlying ground, to use the naughty language. Yeah, I guess, but you can always ask, well, is that really you, right? Like, it seems like there is some sort of convergence ultimately between like the subject as they represent themselves and the object which they seek to represent themselves as being, right? So there's an inherent, at least it seems to me, like I can't describe any notion of self-interest, not even the colloquial one, but at least some root commitment as to what I am that really plays a deep conceptual role in framing everything else that I know about my own self-interest. So by appealing to that convergence between entirely subjective self-interest and sort of an objective characterization of what the self is, you can sort of bring together subjective and objective interests and thereby exert psychological force. At least that's my model. I'm not sure, if that's clarified things. So basically what I'm saying is if you take the second option, like you try to define self in a different way, you'll either end up having an interest in something like what I'm talking about, like, like objective self-interest, or you're going to just end up or you're just going to end up not doing what you wanted to do insofar as you were self-interested, no matter what definition of self-interest you use. So anyway, that's
I don't know, like, I guess I feel like I've sort of accurately assessed like what the core thing going on in the conversation is. So like I would sort of be kind of like repeating myself. I don't know, and I'm sure you would detect that. You seem like a smart person. So I'm not sure how much more value I actually have to offer on the topic. Like my view is just that what you're saying is true. It
trivial.
seems like trivially true. And if you're making a further claim that there's some kind of normative force, if all that normative force means is that you get to make some analytic statement that I'm like failing to be so and so correctly, then sure. If what you mean by it is something psychological, then no. And that's kind of like where I'm at.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So
So I don't know if you want to try to find more
yeah.
space to disagree with me, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna get off in a minute or two here. So maybe if you want to ask another
no
thing or
worries.
two, you can have the last
I think
word
I
too.
think so I think at this point, it's not up to me. Ethan has been listening the whole time. I was hoping, this is for his sake, on my part.
Well, I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Yeah, great. I'm glad. I was also curious myself, having listened to some of your debates, how my view would sort of fare, and it's been really interesting. I'm actually not sure if I care about whether it exerts psychological force at this point. Although I do think that, in fact, maybe I'm gonna sort of stick my neck out and make a prediction. I do, in fact, think that ultimately, on the whole, given perfectly functioning rational faculties, everyone should agree with a well-presented case as to what their interests are and seek to pursue them. But anyway, anyway, it's been fun. Yeah.
It has, and I'm happy to talk again sometime if you want to. Sometimes because I feel sometimes what happens is after you go around for an hour, 2 hours, we're kind of like we kind of see where the collision is but then if you go think about it for like a week or two, then we both maybe have more things to say. So I don't know, if you end up reflecting more and feeling like there's a way to make more headway or get around some of the kind of objections I'm raising, or if you just agree like with what I'm saying and you don't think there's any disagreement or whatever. But yeah, if there's more shit to resolve, I'm happy to talk again. It was a fun conversation. And I know
Great,
Ethan's trying to
thanks. I
say
had fun
something
too.
because he unmuted.
So
Yeah,
just
totally.
before you go, Isaac, yeah, I also enjoyed listening to it and whatnot. A bit hard to track at some points, but so if I was going to summarize the conversation, and certainly don't want to keep you for any longer than you have time.
No,
Um,
it's okay.
I feel like so we've arrived at some point where Matthew's provided an account of interests independent of desires and moral realism, and your position is, yeah, I understand that account, that's coherent, but like I have no reason to adopt it.
Well, adopt is kind of weird language. Adopt sounds like use the terminology in the way he uses it. And I don't think I would use it in the same way. I think it doesn't serve my ends like it serves his ends. Well, maybe I have real ends that are different, but yeah, so I don't think it's so much about adoption. It's just we're not having really a disagreement of substance about realism. We are having a disagreement of substance about motivation, but I'm not sure how much headway we're gonna make on that right now. But yeah, broadly, I think that Matt is taking a view where he's basically just defining terms such that certain things are or aren't analytically going to be right actions or moral actions for different agents. Like broadest picture, that's kind of what's happening. So there's nothing to disagree with. It's analytic, it's true. But yeah, if he's going to try to say that his view has any of these other features that realists want, like that it's got like motivational properties
Yeah.
or anything like that, I'm like very skeptical of that.
Sure. So at this point, you see no reason. You can accept everything Matthew said, but not conclude that, say like eating nuts and bolts is wrong, for instance.
Yeah, well, I can grant his whole framework without talking about what the specific things are that are moral or not. We didn't go to a normal level here. We just
Yeah.
talked meta-ethically. So I'm not sure if that answers what you just
Maybe.
asked.
Yeah. Well,
But we could disagree about he and other realists could disagree about what the right normative view
Mm,
is here.
certainly. Yeah,
Well, they
my
do,
views are
I
weird.
guess.
Yeah.
okay. Well, that sounds like an
Yeah.
interesting
So
realm to take it in the future if both of you guys would be interested.
Yeah, if there's something I'd like you to kind of take away about how I see it, I guess if you're trying to
mm,
get my take, this will be self-serving, so you can obviously, you guys are friends, you can get Matthews anytime. But yeah, like from my point of view, views like this are just what they're saying things that sound robust. It sounds like there's some like big metaphysical thing being said. And most people who argue with them aren't going to do the semantic analysis to realize that's not the case. Like we had to go through like 5 different layers of spooky to not spooky to spooky to not spooky to realize it's pretty trivial what's being said. So there's broadly what I think these views are doing is they're making these statements that it's like a Mott and Bailey, basically. I don't mean that in a mean way. It's like the view sounds like it's making these really robust metaphysical claims about morality, but then when you put some pressure, it's something I can accept every claim of it as like a very staunch anti-realist about morality, right? So yeah, I think there's no real disagreement, but I think I actually think this is an undesirable property of a view, and I think you might even agree. So it might be worth trying to get it out of the view, but it has this property of looking like it's saying something more substantial, I think, than it is.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, broadly, that's what I think is happening. There is a follow up topic about motivation,
Mm,
but that's like a secondary thing. If what you wanted us to resolve was like
So
realism.
then, Matthew,
yeah.
would you say that if Isaac agrees with everything you've said, then he should think things like eating nuts and bolts are wicked and evil in a sense?
Oh, well, no. So you can accept my meta-ethics as analytic, but there'd still be the question of whether there actually is a human nature corresponding to any given description, right? So that's the sort of empirical slash philosophical question that needs to be revised in the case of each norm. I think that, if, I, so as far as like, sort of the Mott and Bailey thing. I think one virtue of my view is kind of like the inverse of what's been talked about. It is that it takes relatively modest commitments, and to me, spins out interesting results out of them, right? Your results were more interesting than what you seemed to be committed to in the beginning.
I need to
But
say
yeah,
something. Mott and Bailey is
yeah,
not. There's no accusation of
yeah,
malice there.
yeah. I know, I'm aware. Like, philosophers can get themselves trapped in these kinds of ways of thinking, like regardless of what intentions, right? In like, maybe I'm fooling myself, right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So the reason why, even when you pointed out, I'm not too fussed, although I do still want to push the disagreement. The reason why I'm not too fussed is that, well, it's part of my whole method to like, take common commitments and spin out, conclude a favorable conclusion out of it. So I think we all live in the same reality. We all are fundamentally the same kinds of beings. So that gives me confidence that ultimately, maybe in heaven, if not here, we can figure it out. But yeah, so I do think that besides the analytic component, there is like an additional like because we didn't talk too much about what human nature actually is. This didn't become absolutely clear. But yeah, you will have a substantive debate then. Well, what am I really? What are the interests that pertain to human nature? But I think that's also a desirable feature, right? It brings us to the examination of human nature, which is looking at actual things before us and then trying to figure out, well, what actually is it before us? And I think that's better than sort of looking after weird Platonic forms that are only accessible through intuitions, right? So that's ultimately where my view heads, I think.
Yeah, and
But
I was not
yeah,
saying
I
there's
agree.
no
Yeah,
desirable features either. Just
yeah,
just to be clear, I just think a
yeah,
undesirable feature. You might disagree, maybe, but I
yeah,
wouldn't be surprised if you'd agree. I think a undesirable feature
yeah,
is if the view. It's not always
yeah,
obvious to us that it'll hit
yeah,
others like this, but if it seems to
yeah.
others like it's saying something grander than it is, and then when you analyze,
Yes,
it turns out
yes,
that you don't disagree, because that's going to just produce a bunch of
that's
disagreement.
right.
That
Yeah,
like there's cases where I
yeah,
really care about word usage and it feels like a matter of dignity, like using the word Holocaust for animals, and I'll bite the bullet on the annoying long conversations that causes because it feels like a matter of justice to use the word correctly. But if there aren't any countervailing concerns like that, I'm typically going to want to take the way of describing
mm,
my view that creates the least like unnecessary conversation. And
yeah,
conversation where the other guy thinks I'm saying a bunch of shit I'm not is probably, yeah, it's got to be in the category of like unnecessary conversation. But yeah, I wasn't saying there's
yeah.
nothing desirable about the view or no good features. That's just a feature that you might
Great.
not like.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, insofar as it gives you that impression, obviously I need to work on something, So I do agree. There's something to work on there to avoid that impression.
Well, and it
Yeah,
could be presentation rather than the view
yeah,
itself, right? Well, I mean
yeah,
it is because we know it's not the view.
yeah.
Yeah, so I don't
Okay.
know if that
Uh,
answers everything you want to know, Ethan, or if you have anything else to
Um,
say, Matt.
well,
But
okay.
I mean, we could have a further conversation about what things actually are on Matt's use of the terms moral or not. But yeah, we don't need to have that to be able to converge at the meta
Yeah,
ethical
I
level.
think so. I just have two more things. So one is that I feel
sure.
like
Mm.
this, I definitely don't want to extend it any longer. My brain is fried. I've been up for, I had a 2 hour call just before this one. Um, and so,
Wow.
yeah, but I do feel like this is somewhat incomplete without the normative discussion. So, like, I mean, if you guys are free now, could we come up with some sort of date to do the normative discussion?
I'm not a great date planner. I'm usually around on weekends. Um,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. You might. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure
Well,
right
so
off the.
how about we set like a minimum like disengagement time so we can have time to think things over and like if we meet next week, like I think that wouldn't change much, or it wouldn't be super interesting. So how about like uh so I'm
Well,
moving
I also I have to flag that I don't know if
next
it's
one.
that like I don't know if I'd be that interested in that conversation, to be honest, because
Yeah.
like I'm sure there's a bunch of things that are going to come out. Like this actually kind of goes to my point of why would I care about it. There's I'm
Mm.
sure like we could talk about, given your term usage, which things come out moral or not on your view, but
Yeah.
what's the point of like I don't know if I'd be interested in working out all these analytic truths. Like we'll just go like we'll determine that A and B and C are moral according to what you mean by moral, and I'll be like okay. So I don't know if there's that much. I don't know if that would be fun or if there's really much value to doing that from
Well,
my perspective.
Yeah, so the real
Like if I
yeah.
told you I have some construal of morality and it's not going to like motivate you to do anything or whatever, but there's just certain things that are like I have some concept Flargelbarf, and there's a bunch of things that are Flargelbarf, and like you know roughly what I mean by Flargelbarf, but we could spend a bunch of time deducing which exact things are Flargelbarf. You'd kind of be like, I guess we could do that, but like, why would I care about that? Like, I'm just happy to grant that there's like probably a ton of things that are Flargelbarf and a bunch that aren't, and you know, which things are and aren't Flargelbarf isn't going to change how I'm doing anything in reality. So, you know,
so then I guess the real core is
Okay.
that there should be some sense in which you must or should or already have adopted this sort of framework.
well,
Or at least
you're.
the must or should must have some sort of motivational impact, I think, right? That's what
I think
you
there's a weird confusion with Ethan. You keep using this word about adopting frameworks. Like adopt, it sounds like you're confusing choosing to use a linguistic scheme with agreeing things are true or not. Like I adopt the framework in the sense that I grant it's all true regardless of how I define my own terms, right? If adopt, what do you like? Yeah, I don't. So it seems like there's some weirdness there. Like it's not what I'll adopt is just what that just means like what words I'm going to use. I don't really see a reason to use the words the way that he's using the words. I can see why he'd do it because he has these views where this way is like important. Um, yeah, sorry, I don't know if that answers what you said. I sometimes lose track after I've been going for a
Yeah,
while.
maybe. So
that's
I would say then, is it right that what's left is this motivational discussion about um, why you should use language in this sense?
Well, the motivational discussion wasn't about why I should use language in that sense. It's about whether someone coming to know the moral facts will motivate them. It's like a standard meta-ethical question of whether moral facts are motivating. Um, it's not specifically about whether I'm motivated to use the language in a particular way. Yeah, that is still something we could talk about, and that would be a more interesting conversation than
true.
what things turn out being good on some construal of morality. Yeah, and again, I'm happy to have a follow up. I'm always a bit resistant to planning out in ahead because I just don't like to clutter my
Yeah,
schedule, and I have a lot of things I'm working on.
that's
But it is like if I didn't want to have a follow up, I would just say like I think we're good probably. So I am happy to do it, but I don't know if I want to set a hard date. Just kind of if you think it over and you find a good topic, like maybe you want to do more on motivation or something, just hit me up with it. Let me know a rough time, and I'll try to coordinate
Sure.
it.
sure. That
And
sounds
so
fine by
when you
me.
say moral facts, you just mean according to this construal.
When I say
Yeah,
moral
yeah. When you
facts,
said moral facts just previously.
I forgot the context I used it in. I might have been referring to his construal or my construal.
Um, I believe his, but it's not that important. Final thing I'll say is just that I have this recorded, and I'm happy to send both of you guys a download link or whatever. Are both of you okay if this goes on the internet, or rather not?
Yeah, you can do that if you want to. I
Yeah,
don't need a
I'm
download
cool with
link.
it.
I record anyway when I have convos, so like I
Right.
have
So
it
yeah,
here.
just
But
you don't want to put it on the Discord archive or whatever.
I may. It's just a matter of my laziness level because I have to sit down and yeah. But I might. There's a lot of conversations that sadly like I just don't get around to uploading. The only ones that I've been putting up lately are like Avi stomping like really ridiculous, annoying
Yeah.
people. So maybe I may or may not.
It's interesting because I think you're like a very skilled debater, but it's in that sense, it's a little unfortunate. Most of the debates that we get to see are you stomping on people that are not very skilled, and might be nice to, yeah. Anyway, that's just getting off topic at this point.
Yeah. No, I agree. It would be nice if there was more people to interact with who had built like actual views. Like this is a good conversation. Talking to someone the like 10th fucking person about why like I don't know. People are fucking insane. Um but yeah, I still think it's often worth talking to those people. Like, firstly, like, I generally speaking am just willing to defend my views. So even if someone shows up and they're kind of dumb, if I like can't correct them in text pretty quickly, I'll still go VC them. So I'll kind of do that for whoever. But also with some of the people, it's actually like important to go, I think, and show that they can't defend their views, like Vosh or something. I think there's a reason that like the whole vegan community was so happy about that video, and why it was so like massively upvoted, and everyone was like very glad about it. And I think it's just because Vosh was a frustrating bad actor who had given a handful of vegans a hard time, and they couldn't out-reason him, and he was spreading really toxic, horrible shit. So everyone's like frustrated and don't really understand how to say why it's wrong, and someone stepping in and just deconstructing that so everyone can see it doesn't make sense. I think that's like almost a public service. So I guess I'm just saying I do this like because there's people who, the conversations that are shitty, that is, I do them because like I'll just talk to people if they think there's a criticism and they want me to defend my view, but also sometimes it's a public service. It's kind of a thing that's got to happen even if it's miserable. Primal Edge Health was another public service.
Oh
I
yeah,
think.
totally makes sense.
This is not a public service though. This was just a fun conversation. Okay.
Great.
Well, anything else, guys,
Thanks.
or is that all?
No,
I'm happy
I'm
to leave it
good.
there.
Thank you.
All right, I really enjoyed talking to you, Matt. Good talking to you too, Ethan, even though you were listening mostly. Yeah, okay. Have a good day,
Cheers.
guys.
Goodbye.
You too. Bye.